Our statement today will be read by the leader of the People's National Congress Reform, which as usual will be led by questions on the statement. Leader.
Court action taken yesterday against the unlawful NRF Act. Yesterday, the legal challenge to the Natural Resource Fund Act was filed in the names of Christopher Jones and Norris Witter. These proceedings challenged the process and of the passage and enactment of the Natural Resource Fund Act of 2021, an act which the People's National Congress Reform has always argued is unconstitutional. The proceedings seeks the court determination of the constitutionality of the Natural Resource Fund Act in the light of the following. 1. Failure by the National Assembly and Parliament to consult the stakeholders, citizens in the enactment and passage of the Natural Resource Fund Act. 2. The decision of the Speaker of the National Assembly to permit the Act to proceed in the face of a petition presented to Parliament seeking time for consultation. 3. The Speaker of the National Assembly allowing the National Resource Fund Bill to be passed without calling on any opposition member of Parliament to debate the bill. 4. The Speaker of the National Assembly allowing the bill to be debated and passed without the mace in the Assembly and with the use of a mock mace. 5. The constitutionally enshrined right to political participation, which include the rights of citizens and civil society organizations to participate in the decision making, was contemptuously disregarded by the government and the Speaker of the National Assembly. And 6, the decision by the Speaker of the National Assembly to allow the continuation of proceedings of Parliament without a motion beyond the hour fixed by the National Assembly. Despite the importance of these legal proceedings, the Guyanese people have recognized that the effective and transparent management of the nation's oil funds is a matter that requires a political solution based on Article 30 of the Guyana Constitution. The PNCR joins civil society and others in the call for a national inclusionary approach, one that respects the fact that our national endowment equally belongs to all citizens, and one that rejects the PPP's approach of domination and control with the aim of facilitating and condoning cronyism, corruption, discrimination, and exclusion. Hickens' appointment as acting police commissioner is a flagrant breach of the Constitution. Many Guyanese have noted the lame efforts of the PPP government through its Attorney General to justify the appointment of Clifton Hickens as acting police commissioner. Before an unconvinced public, the PPP and its Attorney General submitted the excuse that the so-called doctrine of necessity has forced their hands. The doctrine of necessity cannot. It cannot be used to excuse a flagrant breach of the Constitution. In the case of David Patterson versus the Attorney General, the courts have only recently rejected the Attorney General's embrace of this doctrine. The appointment of Hickens remains unconstitutional and is of no legal validity. Article 211(2) of the Constitution, which specifically mandates meaningful consultation with the leader of the opposition and the chairman of the Police Service Commission, makes this abundantly clear. Furthermore, if the PPP concerns were genuinely to avoid, as the Attorney General puts it, a headless police force, then a legitimate option was and still is available. That is, the appointment of the most senior officer to perform the duties of the commissioner, pending a proper process of appointment under Article 211(2). This was the process used for former Commissioner Hoppy. The appointment of Hickens is another manifestation of the lawless and undemocratic approach to governance which has always characterized PPP misrule. It is also a clear manifestation of the politicization of the Ghanaian police force and confirmation that the PPP does not believe in or practice governance based on the rule of law. Without the General Registrar Office getting its act together, elections will not be free and fair. The People's National Congress reform has noted the recent removal of Raymond Cummins from the position of Registrar of Births and Deaths, albeit under the guise of some form of leave. His presence in the position represented the politicization of yet another office that must be independent and professional in its operation. Clearly, Mr. Cummins' presence was designed to give a PPP political hack a job and for the manipulation of the issuance of birth certificates and the facilitation of corruption. His presence resulted in the politicization of the office and the undermining of the system, as was evident by the deterioration of the quality of service and outputs of the office. His removal, though welcome, is insufficient, since the system has been undermined by the very legislation, the Registration of the Births and Deaths Amendment Act No. 9 of 2021, that the PPP regime rushed through the Parliament to enable the issuance of birth certificates at their whims and fancies. What is most egregious is the issuance of birth certificate to foreigners with the hope of further padding the voters list to facilitate PPP rigging. While we must abide by international conventions in the treatment of refugees, the PPP needs to put our national interests first and end the willy-nilly issuance of birth certificates to foreigners. The PPP must recognize that there's a territorial controversy with Venezuela and not jeopardize Guyana's national interests for narrow political gains. The PPP is incompetent, corrupt, and divisive, and is now placing its patriotism in question. By contending that the indigenous people have centuries of association with Guyanese and consequently a birthright to citizenship outside of the constitutional framework of lineage and place of birth, the oligarch is publicly and ineptly contending that he will sell our birthright for political power. He is the oligarch of this PPP regime that fingered the corrupted system for the administration of powers of attorney. They claim they sought to tighten up the system to reduce abuse. Unfortunately, at the same time, they have created a lax system for the issuance of birth certificates by empowering the said officials whose corruption they sought to curtail through legislative action. It is both paradoxical and ironic that those curtailed in one instance are empowered in another to perpetrate corrupt practices in another instance, a practice that is manifestly evident by the issuance of birth certificates to scores who can only qualify for refugee status. The illegal registration of Venezuelan migrants by PPP activists. The economic collapse in Venezuela has triggered mass movement of migrants to neighboring countries. In Guyana, it is estimated that there are over 25,000 Venezuelan migrants. Regardless of the true figure, the presence of these migrants is being exploited for political and electoral purposes by the People's Progressive Party. As GECOM has embarked on its continuous registration exercise, the PNC has received reports that PPP activists are busy registering migrants for birth certificates in order to get them registered by GECOM. We have received reports from Port Kaituma, Maruka, Baramita, and Mabaruma that many of these migrants who cannot even speak English are being given fake birth certificates, addresses, and even names by the PPP agents. We condemn this illegal practice and call on the Registrar General to immediately conduct an urgent and independent investigation. We will not accept this situation. The PNCR remains committed to the comfortable settlement of these economic migrants in our homeland. As part of the coalition government, we welcome them with typical Guyanese hospitality and in full compliance with our international humanitarian obligations to refugees. It is unfortunate that they are now being exploited by the PPP to undermine the democratic will of the people of Guyana through these illegal practices. We call on Guyanese and the international community to condemn the political manipulation of these refugees. The actions of the PPP bring international disgrace to our country. The PNCR wishes to state loud and clear that these attempts by the PPP at election rigging and thwarting the democratic processes do not bode well for the stability of the country. We hope good sense will prevail.
Thank you, Leader. At this time, we'll take questions on the statement, and after that segment, we will then take other questions. So, by the raise of hands, as usual, and you will state your name and your media entity. 1 second. I see a hand up. 1 second. Miss Marshall.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Ms. Marshall from Village Voice News. Among the orders being sought with regards to the natural resource fund, the legal proceedings taking place is an order to declare that all actions taken by anyone, including the Minister of Finance, to be declared under that act to be declared null and void and of no effect. What are the implications of such in cases where monies would have already been deducted from the National Resources Fund?
That's it?
Roysdale.
Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall, for the question. You will recall that in the Natural Resource Fund that was passed, there was a great effort on the part of the sole and legitimate government to ensure that the liability of ministers and persons functioning under this act is virtually removed or watered down to the extent that is rendered completely meaningless. Apart from that, the nature and the purpose of these proceedings is to challenge not only the act, but all acts done either by the board or by the minister or any authorized person under this act. The consequence of acting and the court finding that the act would be unlawful is that those funds will have to be returned to the fund will have to be reconstituted. The government, who's in power at the time, will have to bear the economic consequences of ensuring that that fund is reconstituted.
Thank you. Any other questions on the first statement? So I think that's a no. Any other questions? Ms. Ramdas? You can unmute and go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Go ahead, Ms. Ramdas.
Good evening. My name is Geeta. I'm from High Tribune. On the issue of the illegal registration of Venezuelans, I just wanted to know if the party has made a complaint to GCOM or the police. Yeah.
Thank you.
You got a question? You want to answer? You will answer. All right. As far as I know, GCOM has been informed about this. I think that when the chairman of the party met with GCOM, they were informed. And so we are accumulating more information and we'll deal with the issue as we go along.
Thank you. Mr. Dennis Chabral. Mr. Chabral, we can't hear you. I do believe he's
You hearing me now?
Yes, we are hearing you now.
Yes, good day. Mr. Norton, Dennis Chabral, WRIO's 103.1 FM. Sir, can you say at this juncture what are some of the qualities that Ms. Paula Lawrence will be bringing to the National Assembly, and what will be her shadow cabinet responsibilities?
Well, first of all, one has to assess the team in Parliament. And then when one looks at the team, one felt that it's a good team, but there is need for us to strengthen the people in economics and finance. I'm in the public domain as saying that our first choice would have been Carl Greenidge, but he's performing the critical role of working on the Ghana-Venezuela territorial issue. And when we looked at the list, the next person that would bring to bear those skills and had the experience, Valda Lawrence stands out. And therefore it was based on that the party chose Valda Lawrence as somebody with experience and competence in accounts and finance to be the person to join and complement the team.
Thank you. Ms. Svetlana?
Just a follow-up to my earlier question. I should the court ruled on the legislation as passed on 29th December was unconstitutional, and all actions taken subsequently under that act are unconstitutional. Would the party or the coalition be looking to take criminal charges, criminal proceedings against, say for example, the Minister of Finance in the event of, with respect to the fund in particular, withdrawing funds from the fund? Is this something that the party has considered?
Thank you, Ms. Marshall, for the question. The party will certainly consider that and any other option that will be available to them at the time having regard to the circumstances. So if it is decided at the time having regard to what we know and the extent of the pillage on the fund and the misuse of the funds that is appropriate to institute criminal proceedings or any other sort of proceedings, it will be done by the party or on behalf of the party.
Thank you, Mr. Forde. I see Mr. Campbell's hand is up.
Good morning, Kurt Campbell from the newsroom. Mr. Norton, I was wondering if you are in a position to provide an update on the process for filling the vacancies in Parliament. Where in that process is the AP and UFC coalition? And also, can you say if the selection of Ms. Lawrence to fill one of those vacancies in Parliament was a decision of the full Central Executive Committee?
Well, first of all, let me say that I've outlined the conditions that Comrade Lawrence will be considered under, or she was considered under. This is an issue that was discussed at various levels in the party at one central executive. I think I did point out clearly that there is need for a finance person. Additionally, I consulted with, even though it is not a prerequisite, but the GAP, Natural Front Alliance, and even before that I also engage the AFC. So I think it is as a result of a number of processes that I consider to be important in the process.
Thank you.
And where, sorry, if I could just come back on the first part of my question. Where in that process are we? I understand that it has to do with a lot of correspondence between the representative, the list, GCOM, and also the speaker. Are you in a position to say where in the process is the collation right now?
As far as I know, the information was submitted to the representative of the list under the signature of both the leader of the APNU and the leader of the AFC, Kemra Dramjitan. Since then, the representative of the list would have written to the relevant authorities indicating that Aubrey, Norton, Forde, Lawrence have been extracted, and to suggest to them that they move ahead with the process.
Thank you. Mr. Chabot?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Norton, what do you foresee as some of your immediate priorities as opposition leader when all the processes are over?
Well, there are a number of priorities, but I'm not so sure if you're asking me priority in Parliament or out of Parliament. But let me say this to you. There are a number of priorities, but I do not want to signal almost immediately what is it I intend to do. I am going to meet with all our members of Parliament shortly, and some of the ideas I have will be put. We will then discuss together and we'll work a way forward. Mind you, it is not solely the leader of the opposition. It has to be a collective effort in which all persons will contribute. But I do believe that we need to make more use of the Freedom of Information Act and begin to, through the Parliament, demand more information from this government, which seems to be obsessed with lack of transparency and lack of accountability. And we will have to take action to ensure that they understand the need to be both transparent and accountable.
Follow-up, please, Mr. Norton. Do you foresee any parliamentary changes in your lineup in terms of people being replaced, recalled?
Well, I don't know what you mean. If you're talking about changes in terms of portfolio, etc., yes, they have to be, because at least two persons would have left, and it seems self-evident to me that there will have to be changes. The question of recall is not something that I've put in my head and will determine willy-nilly in advance. Recall, as I understand it, has to be based on the party lack of confidence in somebody or lack of recognition that they aren't performing. If that situation arises, then as a party and as a coalition, we'll deal with it. But I don't want to sit down here as if I'm going to, with a plan to recall people and to remove people. That doesn't sound to me like the best approach to take. And so I didn't give consideration to that. I have been focusing more on what we need to do to strengthen the Parliament and what we need to do to ensure a functioning group that can hold the PPP accountable. Sometimes I think we get too obsessed with recrimination rather than the progress that should be made.
Thank you. Any other questions by members of the media? Any other questions?
If you permit, ma'am, Mr. Norton, prior to the PNC's internal elections, there had been some talk about the party headed by Mr. Jaipal Sharma, as well as that headed by Ms. Sarah Bohali, had not been properly accepted into the APNU fold. Has this matter been resolved?
You seem to know a lot more than I know about the PNC, but continue.
Well, that's my question. Has the matter been resolved?
Which matter?
Where, concerning whether the party headed by Mr. Sharma and the other one headed by Ms. Sarah Bohali have been properly accepted into the EPNU.
Look, all the issues before the APNU we'll put on the table when the APNU meet and discuss them in their entirety.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I see the hands of Ms. Ramdas.
Yes. I just have a follow-up question on my colleague's question with regard to the party taking action to ensure that the PPP becomes more transparent and so on. Mr. Norton, can you just clarify, like, what are some of the measures you plan to take to ensure that the government becomes more transparent and so on?
Well, I already indicated that we intend to use the Freedom of Information Act as one option. We have never ruled out picketing and protesting them. So there'll be a plethora of activities that we can become involved in.
Thank you. Any other questions by the media?
I have another question for Mr. Norton.
Go ahead, Ms. Ramdas.
Sir, the former head of the Suriname company had urged Guyana to follow its footsteps and implement a 24-hour monitoring system of the offshore oil and gas operations. Because in the absence of these measures, oil companies, they can ignore the environmental permits and regulations and so on. In Guyana, we have our fourth project already approved. We know that Exxon has signaled its intent already to go ahead with the fifth. So, sir, do you believe Guyana should heed to this suggestion and kind of give an explanation as to the importance of us, having these systems in place, monitoring systems?
Now, first of all, one has to improve the capacity of the Environmental Protection Agency in terms of technical competence. It is useless to monitoring that if you do not have an effective human resource development plan to ensure you have the people who are competent to do it in the area. In the absence of that, you will have to engage qualified people outside of Guyana, companies, to do that. I believe that we need to ensure that every company in Guyana is accountable, and we need to develop the capacity to ensure we can ensure that there is accountability. So, in essence, I will say yes, we need to monitor, we need to ensure everything is in order, but I do not live in a world of my own. The PPP has shown that they are not prepared to develop the intellectual and other competencies that are needed, and so while it is our desire to have it done, we are concerned that the government seems hell-bent on under-resourcing those institutions, and as a consequence depriving them of the capacity to do what they should do. So while we want it to be done, the government has to be urged to, first of all, have the political will to do it, and secondly, to ensure you improve the institutional capability and capacity of the institutions so that they can be efficacious as they pursue their objectives.
Thank you. I see here Miss Wilberg.
Hi, good afternoon, panel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Kiana Wilberg. I'm with Kaiser News. Mr. Norton, I just have about 2 or 3 questions for you. The first pertains to the Yellowtail project. There are some sections of the society which is of the belief that the government has given away some of its leverage for renegotiation of some of the fatal flaws of the Stabler Block Production Sharing Agreement by quickly granting ExxonMobil the permit within the time frame it expected it. Are you of this view that we could have used the Yellowtail production license to as a means of leverage for fixing some aspects of the deal? And secondly, since 2019, December 2019 to be exact, ExxonMobil has been flaring aboard the Visa Destiny. What is your take on this, sir? And do you believe that it reflects a level of incompetence or however you might want to describe it? How would you deem that? Because it's been well over a year since the state of affairs has been ongoing, and we've been accepting excuses from ExxonMobil. I'll stop at those two for now.
No, first of all, it goes back to the first question. Do they have the competence to do the assessment so that we can move forward? And to the extent that they haven't given the institution the capability to do what needs to be done, then I think they will have grave difficulty doing it. Do I think it should be done? Yes. Is there the capability? It is clearly no, and the government has not engaged an agency to do it. And so the government, by its very actions, is suggesting that it is not operating in the interest of the people of Guyana. I believe what the government needs to do is to live by the law. As far back as 1979, I think, when the first act was passed, or one of the acts on this question of exploration, the position was everything should be done to ensure the people of Guyana benefit. I believe any measure that needs to be taken to ensure that the people of Guyana benefit, we will support and go with. I think the law provides for it, and therefore it should have been done. As it relates to leverage, leverage is anybody in a negotiation should use whatever leverage they have to their advantage. The question of whether the government has used its leverage is another question. I believe a government, any government, should first put as its objective promotion of the rights and interests of the people of Guyana. And whatever leverage there is to achieve that, then it should be utilized. The specificities we can work out as it relates to the particular project.
Thank you, sir. If I can be allowed a follow-up on those two questions. Going back to the point that you made about competency, I also want to throw in another factor here, which has to do with the capacity of the country. There's a debate that is ongoing nationally where some members of the public are saying that the time is now for us to accelerate the development of our resources, while another side of the divide is saying that given the absence of expertise as well as the lack of certain technical and semi-technical skills or skill sets, that Guyana is moving way beyond its time, that it could be shooting itself in the foot or preparing itself for failure with how fast it's moving by accelerating the development of its oil resources. I'd like to get your take on that. Do you think we're moving too fast, or the pace is good enough for you?
If one looks at development theories and development reality, one sees a common trend through all of them, and that is human resource development. Human resource development is at the center of the development of all the economies that would have developed. Have we developed the human resource capacity to do what we are talking about? The answer is no. I am following the debate. I'm inclined to go with those who say that just throwing money at infrastructure will not develop Guyana. What will develop Guyana is resources, one, into human resource development, two, the use of oil resources to diversify the economy, including agriculture, agro-processing. What will develop Guyana is to ensure that the Guyanese people are benefiting from the proceeds from oil and gas. And so the mere throwing of funds to infrastructure, in my opinion, is in keeping with the PPP's modus operandi. They are hell-bent on being corrupt. So for them, infrastructure projects provide them the opportunity to put funds out there that they can obtain in a corrupt way. And so their approach to infrastructural development is not an approach that takes into consideration the needs of the country and then you advance developmental projects. If one looks at the PPP history, they built diamond housing scheme and there was no vision to produce a road network to ease the congestion. They now come as if they have some vision and looking forward, and they're doing this road leading to Mandela Avenue. Now, clearly that road is going to shift some of the traffic away from the East Bank, but it is going to add burdens to Georgetown in the south of Georgetown. I don't know whether it is deliberate or not, but we know that there was a proposal that would have taken this road straight from Sue's Dyke area to Ogle, and then there would have been cut-off points which would have opened more lands, etc. Now, if you see what the PPP is doing on that road, they are in Makkah trying to get people off the lands, offering $30 million, $20 million to get people off the land so that the persons they identify can get these lands. And so when the value goes up with the road, then they will benefit. So you see, it is not even infrastructure development that caters to the needs of the people of Guyana, that caters for the development of Guyana. It is infrastructural development that facilitates PPP corruption and cronyism. And so this approach wouldn't work. I've outlined on numerous occasions the approach that we think will work, an approach in which development is people-centered, human resource development. We give to people a minimum livable income. We create conditions in agriculture, manufacturing, etc. for the diversification of the economy, and we put the requisite infrastructure in place as we go along. There is little or no sense budgeting things that you don't have the capacity to deliver, save and except you want to facilitate corruption, which is what I think the PPP is doing.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you. Any other questions by the media before we wrap up? Mr. Shabra, is your hand up? Oh, I see Mr. Adam Harris here.
Yes, good morning, good morning, good morning. A quick question perhaps. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perhaps Attorney Forde can help me understand. Now we have a lot of matters before the court. There is still the elections petition to be heard, and that's delayed. Member of Parliament Annette Ferguson got a judgment against Bharat Jagdeo. He appealed, the court threw it out. It ended up before the Chief Justice, and it has been months now. She has reserved her decision. Now you're going to the court for the Natural Resource Fund, over the Natural Resource Fund Act, sorry. What guarantee do you have that this matter would be heard in a timely manner, or can there are many others? You know about those men who were charged with the election issue. We're talking too long, I know. The election issue, their matter is still to be heard. James Bond, he was arrested, charged, still to be heard. Ben Lucy, things still to be heard. What guarantee do you have that these matters are going to be heard?
Thank you, Mr. Harris, for the question. Mr. Harris, the question is one that is not restricted to these sort of matters in which they have constitutional political overtones, but a question that goes to the functioning and operation of the judiciary as an element of government and as an agency to provide that sort of service and justice service to the country as a whole. Despite billions of dollars being placed into the justice sector. Delays continue to be a feature of the current system. I must point out that under the introduction of the new civil procedure rules, there have been increase in the timelines in which the court will be able to deliver decisions, and that has been happening. I expect this matter to be heard quickly. I have no guarantee that I could provide to you or the citizens of the public beyond the expectation that the court and the judges who will be assigned to hear it will hear the matter as quickly as possible.
But I also think, Adam, we have to draw a distinction between cases that are designed for political harassment and cases that are aimed at making the PPP accountable. In this case, we are seeking to make the People's Progressive Party accountable, and we think civil society is on our side. The people are on our side, and therefore we have political advantage. In the other cases you reference, clearly the attempt is just to harass people. I don't think they intend to bring a case and to win a case. They want to harass people, and they want to have cases like swords of Damocles over their heads. So the intent of the two things are different. I just wanted to underscore that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
That's a wrap.
All right. I have Mr. Adam Harris's hands up again.
That's you.
Mr. Adam Harris?
Ouch. Yes, sorry about this delay. And I was out for a while. I heard the leader talk about the removal of Raymond Cummings and putting him on leave and all of this kind of thing to facilitate the fraudulent registration of birds and all of this. No, and perhaps the General Secretary help here. To register a bird, there must be some record in the system. I don't know that you can go back to forge records. How is this going to happen? And what checks are you going to put in place to involve the checking of those records back that a man from Venezuela who is 40 years old is given a birth certificate? Can you verify and challenge that?
Go ahead. Go ahead. All right, thank you, Uncle Adam, for that question. As we know, before a person can be registered, the birth certificate of the parents have to be produced. If it's a case where the child was born overseas, you'll also need the birth certificate of that child along with the Guyanese birth certificate. In terms of what measures or what systems are there to ensure that the birth certificates are authentic, those are systems we are looking at right now, because on a daily basis we are receiving complaints. Up to recently, we have received complaint that a birth certificate was issued and the place of birth was recorded at the Guyana Post Office. So there's a whole lot of anomalies that are being raised on a daily basis. Right now we are compiling a dossier. As you are aware, we met with GCOM and we've raised some of these concerns, and we intend to continue to raise these concerns.
I want to add, Adam, we have to ensure that there is a challenge or a review of Act number 9 of 2021, because as I understand it, what they have done by that act is to make the rules lax so that they can use one of the commissioner of oaths to just sign and say this person is X person born in X place. And so what they have done is remove the checks and balances, the checks more or less, to ensure that people aren't made citizens by the whims and fancies of the registrar or one of his agents. In doing that, they have opened the floodgates to being able to register people who are not entitled to be registered. And it is very dangerous, because a lot of the people they're doing it with are Venezuelans. And like we said in the statement, one has to put this thing into a contextual framework. Guyana has a territorial controversy with Venezuela, which is before the ICJ, and the PPP is manifesting a real lack of patriotism and an interest in the people of Guyana by willy-nilly giving citizenship to people who are not entitled to citizenship. And that is the issue we have to address, and we will continue to look at it and come up with the best ways to challenge Act number 9 of 2021, which the PPP pushed through the Parliament and is seeking to use as a means to register in any Tom, Dick, Harry or Arilal, so that they can have the numbers. It's another way of padding a voters list, but it will be challenged politically and otherwise.
Thank you. I'll take our final question. Mr. Shabral, is your hand still up? Is it for another question? If not, Ms. Ramdas?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Norton, can you please give me an update on the filing of the legal motion to get Exxon to comply with the full coverage insurance?
Well, as far as I know, the motion is before the Parliament. As I understand it, the Speaker would have degutted it a lot, and we will have to address how we move forward. But as far as I know, it is approved, but in a fashion that wouldn't be as effective as we expected it to be, and therefore we'll have to take new approaches to ensure we get what we want.
I was talking about the legal challenge because I think it was about 2 weeks ago you did indicate that the party has to engage. I think you said you have to engage the AFC faction of the coalition to.
Well, the AFC is a component, not a faction.
To go ahead with.
The AFC is a component, not a faction, but I don't recall saying that. What I recall saying is that we will challenge the Natural Resource Fund, which we are doing now. But if I recall, I think I said then we have to look at it and decide what actions we will take. But I don't recall committing to a legal process.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ramdas. And I do believe at this time that will bring our press conference for April 5th, 2022 to an end. Thank you for joining us, members of the media and our viewers.